It was an unusually cold morning when Elena Reyes walked briskly toward the hospital, balancing a steaming cup of coffee and her lunch bag. The towering structure of St. Harlan's Hospital loomed ahead, its facade bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun. Elena adjusted her scarf against the chill, her breath visible in the frosty air. She was running late for her shift as an ER nurse, a demanding role she had embraced with passion despite the daily challenges. Outside the hospital's entrance, a figure huddled on the cold concrete steps, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing. The man was thin, his face weathered and gaunt, marked by exhaustion and hardship. His belongings consisted of a torn blanket and a few items crammed into a plastic bag. Elena paused, her eyes meeting his. She saw gratitude mixed with apprehension in his gaze as he shivered in silence. "Good morning," Elena greeted him gently, kneeling down to his level. The man hesitated before nodding, his chapped lips parting as if to speak, but failing to produce sound. "Are you hungry?" she asked, opening her lunch bag. Without waiting for an answer, she handed him the sandwich and apple she had packed earlier that morning. His hands trembled slightly as he accepted the offering, and he muttered a quiet, "Thank you." Elena smiled warmly before rushing inside, her heart heavy. The man's plight lingered in her mind as she tended to patients, stitched wounds, and administered care. Throughout her shift, she couldn't shake the image of him sitting alone in the cold. After work, Elena returned to the steps, but the man was gone. She hoped he had found warmth somewhere, though deep down she doubted it. For the next few weeks, she looked for him whenever she entered or exited the hospital, often carrying extra food just in case. But he didn't return, and life continued its relentless march forward. One particularly hectic afternoon, weeks later, Elena was nearing the end of her shift when a commotion near the hospital's entrance caught her attention. A man in a sharp navy suit and polished shoes stood there, his appearance sharply contrasting with the surrounding bustle of patients and visitors. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried a confident, almost magnetic air. But what struck Elena most was his face. She recognized him instantly. It was the man from the steps. Elena blinked in surprise as he walked toward her, a genuine smile lighting up his features. "Excuse me, are you Nurse Reyes?" he asked in a smooth, measured tone. His voice was steady and clear, a stark difference from the quiet, broken whisper she remembered. "I am," she replied, her curiosity piqued. "Have we met?" The man laughed lightly, his smile widening. "We have, though I wasn't in the best state back then." He extended a hand. "My name is Matthew Ellis. A few weeks ago, you offered me your lunch outside this very hospital." Recognition dawned on Elena, and she shook his hand warmly. "Matthew, I'm glad to see you're doing well. You look different." "Better, I hope," Matthew replied with a chuckle. "I came here today to thank you. That moment of kindness, it set off a chain of events that changed my life." Elena's eyes widened as she motioned for him to sit in the waiting area. She had so many questions, and Matthew seemed eager to answer. As they settled into their seats, he began recounting his story. Matthew had once been a successful real estate agent living a comfortable life with a bright future ahead. However, a series of unfortunate events, including the collapse of his company and a bitter divorce, had left him destitute. Stripped of his home and possessions, he found himself on the streets with nowhere to turn. He spiraled into despair, unsure of how to rebuild his life. "The day outside the hospital," Matthew explained, his voice tinged with emotion. "I had reached my lowest point. I hadn't eaten in days, and I was beginning to lose hope. Your kindness reminded me that people still cared, even about someone like me." Elena listened intently, her heart swelling with compassion. "But how did you turn things around so quickly?" Matthew smiled. After you gave me that meal, I decided to seek help. I walked to a nearby shelter and learned about a rehabilitation program they offered. They provided me with a place to stay, counseling, and resources to get back on my feet. With their support, I applied for a job at a local firm and started rebuilding my life. Elena was amazed. That's incredible, Matthew. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, he said sincerely. But I owe a lot of it to you. Your small act of kindness gave me the strength to take the first step. Matthew's gratitude didn't end with words. Over the next few weeks, he made it his mission to repay Elena's kindness in tangible ways. He organized a fundraiser among his colleagues to support the hospital's charity wing, ensuring that underprivileged patients received the care they needed. He also volunteered his time at shelters, sharing his story to inspire others facing similar struggles. Elena and Matthew stayed in touch, their bond deepening with each interaction. Elena admired Matthew's resilience, while Matthew appreciated Elena's unwavering compassion. Together, they began collaborating on community projects, including a program to provide meals and medical care for the homeless population in their city. As the months passed, their efforts bore fruit. The program they co-founded, aptly named Hope Steps, became a beacon of support for those in need. Stories of lives transformed began pouring in, from individuals finding stable jobs to families being reunited. One evening, after a successful fundraiser for Hope Steps, Matthew approached Elena with a look of quiet determination. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice steady yet vulnerable. "None of this would have happened without you. Your kindness saved my life, Elena, and it's taught me the value of paying it forward." Elena smiled warmly, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "You've done so much, Matthew. You've turned your life around and helped countless others. I'm just glad I could play a small part in your journey." Matthew hesitated for a moment before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, elegantly wrapped box. "It's more than that, Elena. You've shown me the kind of person I want to be, and I hope I can spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." Elena gasped softly as Matthew opened the box, revealing a simple yet beautiful ring. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the depth of his feelings. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, Matthew." Their embrace was met with applause from their friends and colleagues who had gathered nearby to celebrate the culmination of their latest project. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered joy, a testament to the power of compassion and resilience. Years later, Elena and Matthew continued to dedicate their lives to helping others, their love for each other serving as a source of inspiration. Their story became a symbol of hope, proving that even the smallest act of kindness could spark a transformation, not just for one person, but for an entire community. Elena and Matthew's journey together blossomed into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Their story became a symbol of resilience and kindness, not just within their city, but far beyond its borders. They continued to work tirelessly on their initiative, Hope Steps, expanding its reach and impact. The program grew to include partnerships with local businesses, healthcare providers, and government agencies. Their shared vision was ambitious yet simple, to create a system where no one fell through the cracks. Matthew's experience as a former real estate agent proved invaluable as he spearheaded a project to renovate abandoned buildings into transitional housing. Elena, with her deep understanding of healthcare, implemented mobile medical units to serve those unable to reach clinics. One day, while they were visiting a newly opened shelter funded by Hope Steps, a young woman approached them hesitantly. Her clothes were neat but worn, and her eyes carried the weight of recent struggles. She introduced herself as Clara and thanked them for the shelter, explaining that she and her 3-year-old son had been living in her car before finding refuge there. "It's more than just a roof," Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. "For the first time in months, I feel safe. My son sleeps through the night without crying. And I've started applying for jobs again." Matthew and Elena exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride. Stories like Clara's reminded them why they had started this journey and fueled their determination to continue. But their work wasn't without challenges. As Hope Steps grew, so did its visibility, drawing both praise and criticism. Some questioned their methods, while others doubted their ability to sustain such a massive operation. There were days when the pressure seemed insurmountable, but Matthew and Elena leaned on each other for support. One particularly difficult evening, as they sat in their modest home, reviewing budgets and proposals, Elena sighed deeply. Sometimes it feels like we're taking on the world, she admitted, rubbing her temples. Matthew reached across the table, taking her hand in his. We are, he said with a soft smile, but we're not doing it alone. Look at how many people believe in this mission. Look at what we've already accomplished. Elena nodded, her resolve strengthening. You're right, and if we can give even one more person a chance at a better life, it's worth it. The next day, their determination bore fruit when a major philanthropic organization reached out, offering substantial funding for Hope Steps. The funds allowed them to expand into neighboring cities where the need for their services was just as urgent. They hired dedicated staff, many of whom were former beneficiaries of the program, further cementing the cycle of giving back. Amidst the whirlwind of their work, Matthew and Elena found time to nurture their personal lives. They married in a small, heartfelt ceremony attended by friends, family, and several individuals whose lives they had touched. The wedding was a celebration of love and second chances, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room when Matthew spoke his vows. Your kindness saved me, he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. And it taught me that the smallest gesture can change everything. I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that to the world. And to you. Their marriage became another cornerstone of their journey, solidifying their partnership both personally and professionally. They became a true team, each complementing the other's strengths and filling the gaps where needed. As the years passed, Hope Steps became a national model for addressing homelessness and poverty. Other cities replicated their programs, and both Matthew and Elena were invited to speak at conferences and panels, sharing their insights and experiences. Despite their growing fame, they remained grounded, never losing sight of the individual lives behind the statistics. One day, as they visited a bustling community center funded by Hope Steps, a little boy ran up to them, holding a handmade thank you card. His name was Jamie, and his family had recently moved into one of the transitional housing units. He tugged at Elena's hand, his eyes bright with excitement. Are you the lady who helps people? He asked earnestly. Elena crouched down to his level, her heart melting. I try to, she said with a smile. But there are so many people who help too. Jamie grinned and handed her the card. Thank you for helping my mom and me. She said we don't have to be scared anymore. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she hugged the boy. Moments like this reminded her and Matthew of the profound impact of their work. As they drove home that evening, Matthew turned to Elena with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about how far we've come since that day on the hospital steps? Elena nodded, her gaze distant but filled with warmth. All the time, it feels like another lifetime. But I think about how much can change with a single act of kindness. It still amazes me. Matthew reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. You changed my life, Elena. And because of you, I've been able to help others change theirs. Elena smiled, her heart full. It wasn't just me, Matthew. You found the strength to turn things around. I just gave you a sandwich. Matthew laughed, a sound filled with genuine joy, and it was the best sandwich I've ever had. Their journey continued, marked by love, perseverance, and unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. They proved that no matter how small an act of kindness might seem, its ripple effects could transform countless lives. Together, they showed the world that hope, once ignited, could never be extinguished. As time marched on, Elena and Matthew's efforts grew into something even more extraordinary. Hope Steps once a modest initiative born of a simple meal shared on a cold morning, had become a nationwide movement. With chapters in cities across the country, it provided shelter, healthcare, education, and job training for thousands of individuals and families. The program's impact rippled outward, inspiring others to create similar initiatives in their communities. One day, Elena received a letter that stood out among the usual pile of correspondence at the Hope Steps office. The envelope was simple but carefully sealed, addressed to her personally. She opened it to find a handwritten note. Dear Nurse Reyes, you may not remember me, but years ago I sat on the steps of St. Harlan's Hospital. I was lost, hungry, and hopeless. You gave me a sandwich and a kind word, and in that moment you changed my life. Today I am a social worker helping others find their way, just as you helped me. I wanted you to know that your kindness didn't just save me, it gave me a purpose. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. With gratitude, a friend. Elena felt tears well up as she read the letter. She had long since stopped thinking of her actions on that day as extraordinary, but the note reminded her of the profound impact even the smallest gesture could have. She shared the letter with Matthew that evening, and they both reflected on how many lives had been touched since their journey began. A few weeks later, they were approached by a documentary filmmaker who had heard of their work. The filmmaker, a passionate advocate for social justice named Iris Moran, wanted to tell their story. Initially hesitant, Elena and Matthew eventually agreed, realizing that the documentary could inspire others to take action in their own communities. The filming process was both challenging and rewarding. Iris followed them through their daily lives, capturing the joy, the struggles, and the deeply human moments that defined their mission. The documentary also featured stories of individuals whose lives had been transformed by Hope Steps, including Clara, Jamie, and others who were eager to share their gratitude. When the film, titled Hope on the Steps, premiered, it was met with critical acclaim. Audiences were moved by the raw, unfiltered portrayal of compassion and resilience. The documentary sparked a wave of donations and volunteers for programs across the country, amplifying the impact of their work in ways Elena and Matthew had never imagined. One particular moment during the film's premiere stood out. As the credits rolled, a standing ovation erupted, and Elena turned to Matthew, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. "Can you believe this all started with a sandwich?" she whispered. Matthew chuckled, pulling her into a hug. "I can, because sometimes it's the smallest acts of kindness that create the biggest changes." In the years that followed, Elena and Matthew's legacy grew. They continued to innovate, creating new programs to address emerging challenges. One of their most ambitious projects involved partnering with technology companies to develop an app that connected individuals in need with nearby resources like food, housing, and medical care. The app, named Beacon, became a vital tool in the fight against homelessness and poverty. Despite their growing responsibilities, Elena and Matthew remained deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of Hope Steps. They visited shelters, spoke at schools, and worked alongside volunteers, always staying connected to the people they served. Their humility and genuine care endeared them to everyone they met. As their family grew, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Sophia. They made sure to instill in her the same values that had guided their own journey. Sophia grew up surrounded by stories of resilience and hope, and as she grew older, she became an active participant in their work. One summer, while visiting a new Hope Steps shelter in a struggling neighborhood, Sophia, then 8 years old, approached a boy, about her age, who was sitting alone. His clothes were patched, and he looked nervous, clutching a small toy car in his hands. Sophia sat beside him and introduced herself, her natural warmth putting him at ease. "What's your name?" she asked. "Leo," the boy replied shyly. Sophia smiled. "My parents say it's okay to feel scared sometimes, but they also say things can get better. They help people, and maybe they can help you too." Leo's eyes widened. "Your parents run this place?" Sophia nodded proudly. "Yep, and maybe someday you can help people too." Elena watched the exchange from a distance. her heart swelling with pride. Sophia was a natural, carrying forward the legacy of kindness and empathy that had shaped their family's story. As the years turned into decades, Matthew and Elena continued to dedicate their lives to serving others. Their work earned them countless awards and honors, but it was the stories of individual lives transformed that meant the most to them. They often revisited the hospital steps where their journey began, reflecting on how far they had come and the countless lives that had been touched along the way. In their later years, Elena and Matthew retired from the day-to-day operations of Hope Steps, passing the torch to a new generation of leaders. They remained active as mentors and advocates, always willing to lend their wisdom and support. One crisp autumn morning, they returned to St. Harlan's Hospital for a quiet visit. The steps were the same, but the world had changed around them. As they sat together, hand in hand, Matthew turned to Elena with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think the people we've helped will keep passing it on?" he asked. Elena smiled, her eyes twinkling with certainty. "I know they will. Kindness has a way of spreading, Matthew, just like it did with us." Their journey had come full circle, but the legacy of their compassion would continue for generations to come, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could light a spark that changed the world. As Matthew and Elena sat on the steps of St. Harlan's Hospital, the memories of their shared journey flowed between them like an unspoken conversation. The air was crisp, the trees around them painted in shades of gold and amber. People passed by, some hurrying into the hospital, others pausing briefly, unaware of the profound history tied to the very spot where the couple sat. The couple had grown older, their faces lined with years of work and love, but their spirits remained as vibrant as ever. They watched a young woman exit the hospital with a small child in tow, her tired but grateful expression reminiscent of so many lives they had encountered over the years. "Elena," Matthew said softly, his voice steady but reflective, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? If you hadn't handed me that sandwich?" Elena turned to him, her smile warm and unwavering. "I think about it often, but I also believe that everything happens for a reason. Maybe that day we were meant to find each other, to create something bigger than ourselves." Matthew nodded, his hand tightening around hers. "It feels like we've lived 1,000 lifetimes since then." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the world move around them. Finally, Matthew broke the quiet. "Do you know what I'm most proud of, Elena?" She looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "It's not the programs or the awards or even the thousands of lives we've helped," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "It's the fact that we kept going. Through all the doubt, the challenges, the exhaustion, we never gave up." Elena's eyes softened and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't give up because we had each other. You gave me strength when I needed it, and I hope I did the same for you." "You did," Matthew said without hesitation, "every single day." As they sat there, a familiar figure emerged from the hospital's entrance, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform carrying a clipboard. His face lit up when he saw them. It was Dr. Marshall, one of the hospital's administrators and a longtime supporter of Hope Steps. "Mr. and Mrs. Ellis," Dr. Marshall called out, approaching them with a warm smile. "What a surprise to see you here." Matthew and Elena stood, shaking his hand warmly. "We were just reminiscing," Elena explained. "This place holds so many memories for us." Dr. Marshall nodded knowingly. "You've left quite a legacy here, and far beyond these walls. But I have to say, it's not just your work that inspires us. It's the way you've lived your lives, always leading with kindness." Matthew chuckled. "Kindness has been our guiding star. It's amazing what a little of it can do." As they spoke, a group of medical students gathered nearby, clearly recognizing the legendary couple. One of the students, a young man with an eager expression, approached nervously. "Excuse me," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm here because of a scholarship from Hope Steps. My family and I wouldn't have made it through without your help." Elena placed a gentle hand on his arm, her smile radiant. "You're here because of your own hard work and determination. We just gave you a little nudge." The student smiled, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Still, thank you. I hope to make a difference the way you both have." As the student returned to his group, Matthew turned to Elena with a soft laugh. "It seems the ripple effect keeps growing." Elena nodded, her heart full. "And it always will." That evening, as they returned home to their cozy house filled with photographs and memories, they settled into their favorite armchairs by the fireplace. Sophia, now an adult and deeply involved in Hope Steps, had called earlier to share updates about new projects she was spearheading. Knowing that their legacy was in capable hands gave them a profound sense of peace. "Elena," Matthew said after a long moment of silence, "I want you to know that meeting you was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You didn't just save me, you showed me how to live." Elena reached for his hand, her eyes glistening. "And you've given me a life filled with meaning. I wouldn't change a single moment of it." As the fire crackled softly, they sat together, their hands intertwined, their hearts at peace. They had lived a life of purpose, love, and unyielding kindness, leaving behind a legacy that would endure for generations. And as the world continued to turn, the seeds of hope they had planted would keep growing, proving that one act of compassion could truly change everything.